The ancient witness comes today from the book of Genesis, chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. Yahweh, the Lord, appeared to Abraham by the oak grove of Mamre, while Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. Looking up, Abraham saw 3 travelers standing nearby. When Abraham saw them, he ran from the entrance of the tent to greet them. Bowing to the ground, he said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please do not pass by our tent. Let a little water be brought, that you may bathe your feet, and then rest yourselves beneath this tree. As you have come to your faithful one, let me bring you a morsel of food, that you may refresh yourselves. Afterward, you may go on your way." "Very well," they replied, "do as you have said." Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quick, take a bushel of the finest flour and knead it into loaves of bread." Abraham then ran to the herd, selected a choice and tender calf, and sent a worker hurrying to prepare it. Then Abraham took cheese and milk and the calf that had been prepared, placed them before the travelers, and waited on them under the tree while they ate.
In Victor Hugo's classic novel Les Miserables, Jean Valjean transforms from living the life of a prisoner into a celebrated member of his community. Unfortunately, he is relentlessly chased by a rule-obsessed policeman who will stop at no inn to capture him. Now, Hugo's book is timeless. And since its release in the 1860s, it has been drafted into a number of stage productions and screenplays. And they are all a little different. I particularly enjoy the motion picture from 1998. This one stars one of my favorite actors, Liam Neeson, who plays Valjean. And there is a critical scene towards the beginning that establishes the nature of Valjean and his transformation. And the short of it is, when he is taken in by the bishop and treated well, Valjean is given a chance to stay and become a more whole person. But when he steals and is brought back to the bishop by the police, the bishop gives him another chance. So he is compelled by his inner self to live beyond his label. Now, the scene begins shortly after being released from serving hard time. Valjean makes his way to the nearest town, and none of the inns, though, will let him stay the night. And when the local police find him resting on a town bench, they direct him to a particular house. And hearing a knock on the door, the bishop answers and invites Valjean in. Valjean is amazed that the bishop would show him the kindness of hospitality, especially after being labeled as dangerous because of his passport. So Valjean dines with the bishop and is offered a bed in the guest room. And in the early morning hours, Valjean leaves, taking some candlesticks that he will need to pawn for money. And perhaps the most surprising move comes after Valjean is returned to the bishop's residence by the police. When asked, the bishop informs the police that he gave Valjean the silverware. Not only that, but Valjean should take the candlesticks too, themselves worth a lot of money. He then says, and I'll paraphrase here, "I'm doing this because you no longer belong to evil. I've ransomed you or bought you from fear and hatred, and now give you back to God. Now, writing in the 1860s, Victor Hugo lived in a time and place that was less civilized in regards to human rights and support of those who were struggling. This was before the time of government assistance, and people without jobs starved on the streets. And Hugo's novels depict a disgust for the wide economic divides between wealth and poverty, as well as the injustices committed against the lower classes of society, simply because of their circumstances. And part of what makes Hugo's stories so timeless is that critique, but also because of the gracious hospitality of the bishop. And hospitality to strangers was a very big deal in the ancient world. Historians say that in the time of the Greeks, there were very few hotels. And there certainly were no GPS systems or location finders. And there were very few restaurants outside of major cities. And so being in a tough spot away from home could be a life or death situation. And as far back as the 8th century, before Common Era, Homer's epic, The Odyssey, documented the importance of hospitality. Homer writes that the goddess Athena once turned Odysseus into a quote-unquote beggar in order to test the loyalty of his subjects. And when she did, there were some who taunted him and others who attacked him. Some told him to get lost. Many accused him of being lazy or being an opportunist, saying that he was living off the hard work of others. And there were some who gave, but only begrudgingly and without respect for his dignity. Some believed that it could even be a test from the gods. There were some folks, though, who insisted that the visitor should be treated with kindness and that no one knows the circumstances that brought the unfortunate soul to such a circumstance in life. Well, in our ancient witness for the day, 3 visitors arrive at the home of Abraham and Sarah. And the story says that Abraham and Sarah, being the people that they are, welcomed in the visitor. Without hesitation, Abraham says, "Why don't you stay with us? This heat must be hot and tenuous for you. We have room at our table. In fact, why don't I make a nice spread, a nice table under the shade? Perhaps you'll stay and rest from your weary journey." Now, Sarah and Abraham do not know who these strangers are, where they come from, or how they came to happen upon their home. But they extended that invitation anyway. And the storyteller notes that they don't just welcome them. Abraham goes out of his way to dote on them. He makes a place for them under the shade of the oak trees, and in a charming understatement, offers to bring just a little water and a little bread for his guests while they rest from the heat of the day. And yet, he and Sarah will treat them to a lavish meal. And while they're dining, something interesting happens that is about to change everything. The nameless ones that were welcomed without knowing who they were are now blessing Abraham and Sarah with their words and their actions. And what follows from this blessing will be a generations-long journey from alienation to belonging, from being a nomadic people struggling to coexist in harsh environments and amongst warring and violent tribes, to finally having a place to call home. And the story suggests that hospitality is one of the ways we come to know God. That in the act of welcoming and receiving and blessing others, we would be blessed in turn. And what the story also suggests is that Abraham and Sarah don't offer hospitality in order to earn favor from God. They did it because it was hot outside, and they recognized that people get thirsty after being on the road. They did it because they themselves had been travelers once. They themselves had been starving and hungry once. And they themselves had found safety and shelter once in the company of strangers. The point is, beloveds, their blessing came through the welcome, not as a reward for it. It came as a gift inside an act of hospitality extended to someone they had no particular reason to trust. And it's not to say that the act of welcome did not come without risk, because there's always risk and vulnerability when it comes to receiving visitors, just as there is in love. But Abraham and Sarah's desire to build community overcame whatever vulnerability they had. And so I wonder these days what strangers are being welcomed. With so many mass deportations from homes and schools and workplaces, folks who've lived and built their lives here for decades, raising families and businesses along the way, building community, labeled as aliens and strangers who don't belong. But not just migrants. The folks in charge seem to be going out of their way to convince the world that drag queens and trans youth are threatening to children. Never mind the guns that kill and threaten so many. Impoverished families are labeled as drains on a system that supposedly only belongs to those who earn it. But beloveds, the good news is we are all children of God. We don't have to fully vet outsiders before welcoming them. And when we welcome others, we welcome God. And when we do, we are manifesting God's love for all. So faith is often rooted in grand commitments and sacrifices, in the hope that God will reward the one making the sacrifices with blessings, with God's favor and the promise of eternal bliss. But in the meantime, the poor, the marginalized, the oppressed, and different are left without compassion. They're left without care or the resources needed to live peacefully and freely. When we can serve our local community with generosity and compassion, we help to bring hope and healing and celebration to our neighbors. When we welcome those who are excluded, judged, rejected, and misunderstood, we offer people a path to wholeness and to life. And all it takes is to see people as Abraham did, as Jesus did, as beloved children of God, and to treat them as the God-imaged and God-beloved and God-incarnated humans they are. Amen.